Hi, I'm Manny Fitzsimmons. I'm your Washington REALTORS Legal Hotline lawyer, and I'm going to emphasize that I am your Washington REALTORS Legal Hotline lawyer because I love what I do, because I love working with realtors. And one of the reasons I do is because of who you are. And the strength, the biggest strength that so many realtors bring to this profession is unfortunately also, potentially at least, your biggest exposure to liability. What on earth am I talking about? Realtors are problem solvers. Every time you meet a new client, your goal is to solve their problems. And throughout a transaction, they have countless problems that you solve. Starting with the seller doesn't know how much their property is worth, how to market it, or how to find a buyer to buy their property. You're going to solve all of those problems for your seller. That's what you're going to do. And then along the way, when they have title issues or when the buyer's lender needs something, you're going to solve those problems also. So what happens when you, as a realtor, more specifically, a real estate licensee, a person holding a broker's license, insured for the delivery of real estate brokerage services? What happens when a person who is geared to solve problems encounters a problem on behalf of a client that is outside the realm of real estate brokerage services? This is where your greatest character asset becomes your potentially largest exposure. Because when you travel outside your lane of providing real estate brokerage services and you offer to build the rails on a person's deck, to paint the interior walls, to fund in advance a buyer's earnest money, to serve as a power of attorney, to sign documents on behalf of a buyer or seller, to review their closing documents so that they make sure that they have all of their questions answered before they get to closing. When you offer or agree to do something for a client that is outside of the fairly narrow scope of providing real estate brokerage services, then you are engaged in the unauthorized provision of something. If you're engaged in some kind of a contractor service for a seller or a buyer, and you're not a licensed and bonded contractor, or I'm sorry, you're not an insured and bonded contractor with a registration through the state of Washington, then you are way outside your lane. I like to say when I'm teaching classes that you are up on the high wire with no net. As a legal hotline lawyer, I encounter people oftentimes who are trying to provide legal services to their client. Anytime you get that question after closing about the house was supposed to have the refrigerator still with it, it was supposed to have the washer and dryer, I think there's dry rot in the floor that the seller didn't disclose, it was supposed to be cleaned and it's filthy, there's tires on the back fence line that didn't get hauled away. What's my remedy? The buyer might ask you. Brokers, you're not licensed to answer that question. If I sound a little bit like a broken record to you, if you've heard me do a video along these lines before, that's because this information bears repeating, and I will tell you that in recent weeks I have gotten so many questions from brokers asking all of those topics that I've been mentioning throughout this video. I very recently had a broker ask me about a mental health diagnosis she'd just given a buyer and whether or not she needed to deliver that mental health diagnosis to somebody. Broker, unless you've got a mental health counseling license, then you should not be rendering mental health counseling. So brokers, understand the limitations of your license. You are licensed to provide the services, the real estate brokerage services, identified in RCW 1885. They are a defined set of services. If you're operating outside those services, you are operating outside the scope of your license and you are uninsured. You are creating risk for yourself and for your firm, and potentially for your client as well. If you have questions on this topic or any other, visit warealtor.org and follow the links to the Legal Hotline and ask me a question. Thank you for being a Washington REALTORS member.